Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Welcome back to the Quianna Canada show. Hope you are having an excellent weekend. I know that I was able to. I went out and took a walk this Saturday. The weather was a little bit clear today. It was warmer today. And so it was pleasant to get out and take a walk. So I went down to the city center and just bought a few things and ready to bring this live stream to you. Before we get into today's topic, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Remember that your likes, your shares, and any person that subscribes to this channel, what it does is it pushes videos like this up in the algorithm. It tells the algorithm that these videos are important. But we must be reminded that just because videos like this are not pushed up in the algorithm does not mean that videos like this are not important. Okay. And so, ladies and gentlemen, before we get into today's topic, there is an announcement that I often make, and that has to do with transnational repression. So, what is transnational repression? Transnational repression is a form of political repression where countries are reaching across their borders to silence the dissent of their citizens. Countries, excuse me, when we're talking about transnational repression, it does not necessarily need to be the country of origin that is silencing the dissent of a person. It could be a foreign state as well. And so there are a number of ways in which states attempt to silence the dissent of a activist, a journalist, a dissident, a human rights defender. This can be some of the hard tactics, such as incommunicado detention, extraordinary renditions, and enforced disappearances. In some of the most extreme cases, state agents will unalive the dissident. There are some soft tactics that states use to silence dissent, and that is political use of psychiatry. They also use digital repression. So, for example, a state will repress the social media accounts, or excuse me, the state will attempt to silence dissent by shadow banning the dissidents' social media accounts, not only shadow banning their accounts, but also throttling their accounts, etc. So you can see how digital repression plays a significant role. There's also other methods such as surveillance, and we've seen multiple journalists recently talking about a state's use of surveillance. We've seen Alan McLeod speak about this. We've seen um, Ronan Farrow speak about this, and we also seen Julian Assange talk about this. So this is a very serious practice. And I think it's important that we bring awareness to this because oftentimes there are states that are engaging in transnational repression that we often don't hear enough about. And we're only focusing on certain states and not the other states. And I think that that is a lopsided way of looking at state crime. And I think that to equalize um, the literature and the research on transnational repression, that we need to give a bird's eye view to all state actors that are engaging in this kind of crime. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this leads me into today's topic. And today's topic is going to be dealing with the Luigi Mangione case. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're returning back to this case. And there is a lot that is going on in this case that just does not seem right to me. And we are going to be getting into that. Before I get into those reasons, I want to first start off by saying that personally, I don't think that Luigi Mangione is the same person that committed this crime against United Healthcare worker Brian Thompson. I'm consistent in my approach because in a few videos back, which I will link to this video, I stated that when we look at the photos, so there's two separate photos. There's one photo of Luigi Mangione in, I think, an accommodation or a hostel, and the facial features looks, I think, markedly different than the features Mangione's facial features. And then the person who is in the McDonald's does not look anything like Luigi Mangione. And so I am of the opinion that there may be, it raises the question as to whether other people are involved in this case, right? And we are actually going to get into that in depth, but I want to focus on that for a moment, right? So Luigi Mangione does not look like the culprit that is, so we have two CCTV footages, so just two snapshots of a suspect, right? And both snapshots don't look like Luigi Mangione to me. Now, I've taken into consideration that this suspect is hooded and, you know, um, and so possibly like this, the hood is covering his face, which can actually alter the way his facial features look. But when I'm looking at the nose and the chin, because in one photo that, um, or excuse me, in one snapshot, there is the visibility of the suspect chin is, to reiterate, it's more visible. And so, in my personal opinion, it does not look anything like Luigi Mangione. And this, I guess, to me, what it does is it raises the question as to whether there is an organized crime angle in this Luigi Mangione New York case. Now, why am I saying that? So, when we're looking at international law, so when we're looking at the United Nations Transnational Organized Crime Convention, and we see that there is elements, right? So there is this element participation in an organized crime group. And so one of the elements is satisfying the element of conspiracy. And so what does it take to satisfy that element? Well, the accused must conspire to commit a serious crime that benefits him. And we're going to get into that, but you may say, well, Quianna, you are saying at first that you don't think that Luigi Mangione is the culprit. You think that there is a second suspect, or you think that there is another suspect. And ladies and gentlemen, while that is true, that does not mean that Luigi Mangione is not involved in this crime. To satisfy the element of conspiracy, the accused must conspire to commit a serious crime that benefits them. So you may ask, well, Quianna, how does Mangione benefit from this crime? Well, if we look at it, so one is acquittal, right? If Luigi Mangione is acquitted, then there is celebrity. He becomes a celebrity, a national sensation. He gets book deals, he gets media interviews, and possibly a modeling contract, right? Because it's no secret. Many people believe that Luigi Mangione is an attractive man. And so I think it wouldn't be uncommon for a person that looks like Luigi Mangione to do print work. He may not be able to do runway, but one can see him doing print work, right? Like commercials. And all this would come from that acquittal. What else does Luigi Mangione stand to benefit from an acquittal? Well, he is already looked at by the public as a hero. The public sees Mangione as a national sensation. And that is what he stands to benefit. So that first element has been satisfied. And ladies and gentlemen, I am going to be getting into the attractive element later on in this live stream. But do you see? So to satisfy that initial element, a person needs to commit a serious crime that benefits them. And you may say, well, Kiana, why would a person commit a crime like what Luigi Mangione did to benefit him? And my argument would be I would go back to that initial um, description is that there is celebrity there. So that there now, like Luigi Mangione is a celebrity. There are, I'm pretty sure that he'll get interviews, he'll get book deals, um, and he'll possibly get like modeling contracts. Like his celebrity is going to go up the roof. Like he's already, the public is already on his side. So when we're talking about in the court of public opinion, he's already been acquitted in the court of public opinion. And this is why it raises the question as to whether our attention is being diverted from the real facts in this case. Because, ladies and gentlemen, most people, what they are focusing on are the surface facts, right? So basically, they're the surface elements. They're looking at it from a worm's eye view. They're looking at the state and a person who was aggrieved by a medical procedure, and they are looking at this corrupt healthcare system in the United States, and they are making connections from that. So you have a corrupt healthcare system in the United States. You have a person who is aggrieved and harmed by that corrupt healthcare system. And then this aggrieved person lashes out on this corrupt healthcare system, and the state intervenes in support of the corrupt healthcare system, and the public in this case is in support of the aggrieved person. But is it deeper than that? Is the question. I want you to think for a moment and ask yourself, is this case deeper than what we are hearing in the news? Is it deeper than some of the commentary that um, social media influencers and podcasters are presenting to us? Is it deeper? Is this merely about capitalism, or is it about something more? Are you thinking about that? And I want you to continue to ponder on that question as I go to the second element of this participation in organized crime. So we already know that the person has to stand to benefit from, we're talking about organized crime. So we have a person or more than one person, they have to benefit from the crime, right? But also, it can't just be one person. it has to be multiple persons. In many cases, it is multiple persons, but when we are looking at the pure conspiracy case law, or we're looking at elements or statutes that are talking about conspiracy, conspiracy really only involves two people. So it involves one person conspiring with another person, although in many instances, there are multiple persons, such as in the cases of organized crime. And so this raises the question as to whether or not the state is involved. And you may say, well, Kiana, how could the state be involved in this particular case? Look, Kiana, they're parading him around in the media. They have him in a bulletproof vest. They are treating him like a criminal. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll get into that later in this stream. But for now, I really want to focus on the elements, right? To break this all down so that we can think critically about this particular case and to raise the question as to like what is being presented to us. So let's take a step back. We had a man who unalived a person who had a lot of power in the healthcare industry. And from the public's view, that this person was thought about, or excuse me, this person was viewed as corrupt. And if not him, if he's not viewed as corrupt, definitely the corporation is viewed as corrupt, as capitalist, and taking money from vulnerable citizens. So you have a suspect, a man who unalives him early in the morning, and the suspect gets away on a bike and somehow ends up, I think, I'm light on the facts about this, and I would probably need to look it up, but I don't think it's an important fact. But the suspect travels from New York to Pennsylvania, but we must be reminded that the suspect was living in a hostel. Not, excuse me, he was um, renting a hostel briefly for a moment, and so he was in New York, committed the criminal act, traveled to Pennsylvania, was arrested at McDonald's, and was arrested with all of the evidence. And that's hard to believe, ladies and gentlemen, that a suspect would keep all of the incriminating evidence on them that would tie them to the crime, unless the suspect didn't see any of that evidence as incriminating, or unless there is more to this story that we're being told. So let's canvass the first option. A suspect would not hold on to evidence that is incriminating. We understand that when people are trying to get away with crimes, what they will try in many cases, and I'm not saying all, but in many instances, suspects will try to eliminate or get rid of or dispose of evidence that is tying them to the crime. Howsoever, in this case, the suspect is caught with all of the elements that is necessary to convict them in this particular case, right? So everything is available. So you have the weapon that's available, you have currency, you have foreign currency, which is suggestive that the suspect was attempting to possibly leave the country and use foreign currency in another country. You have different identifications, which is suggestive that the suspect is attempting to conceal their identity so that they can get away with this offense. And so it's unbelievable that a suspect be would incriminate themselves and have everything that is needed to tie them to a crime on their person. And this raises an important question, ladies and gentlemen, as to whether or not the state is involved. And so we know that Luigi Mangione could be a stand in for the real criminal. And the real criminal, ladies and gentlemen, could be a state agent, someone who works in government. So, you may say, well, Kiana, how can Luigi Mangione be a stand in for the perpetrator? Well, Luigi Mangione is attractive. And there is a large body of evidence that states that universally attractive people are less likely to uh, be perceived as criminals, right? And also, the state can use universally attractive people to commit homicides for them. And you may ask, well, Kiana, that sounds ludicrous. Why would the state utilize or contract attractive people to commit a state crime for them? Well, first, there's little evidence attaching the state to the crime. As we see in the Luigi Mangione case, nobody is pointing the finger at the state and saying that the state is involved, right? Everybody is thinking that Luigi Mangione is a person who is innocent or not the culprit, or everybody is thinking that he is justified in if he did commit this offense, everybody thinks that he is justified for doing so. So you can see that there is not any arguments that are being circulated as the state is possibly involved in this. And so what what's next, right? So by there being little evidence attaching the state to a crime like this, what that does is that it eliminates a person who is a nuisance to the state. And you might say, "Well, Kiana, now you're really throwing me for a loop. Like Brian Thompson is a very wealthy person. He is um, a lot of state agents are on his side. The state is, against Mangione, and um, in a sense, the state is persecuting Mangione, and um, in defense of Brian Thompson." And so that raises another question. Well, how is Brian Thompson a nuisance to the state? Well, ladies and gentlemen, Brian Thompson probably declined to commit a crime of obedience. So the state could have asked Brian Thompson to maybe like decline some person's claim, or to do something that was illegal, and maybe Brian Thompson declined to do so. That's just one theory, right? But what if we don't take that theory that that the state is trying to get rid of Brian Thompson, right? What if we're not taking that theory? So let's go back to the elimination of a person who is a nuisance to the state. Well, if we're looking at the Luigi Mangione case, what we can come to understand is that some people might be radicalized by seeing a incident like that happen on live television. Like for instance, we see Luigi Mangione. He committed or he allegedly committed this crime, and he is looked at as a hero and a national sensation. And some people aspire to that. Some people look up to that. Some people want that kind of notoriety. Some people want to be infamous like that. Some people want that kind of acclaim. And so what could happen is that the state could commit a crime like this, and then what this would do is cause radicalization, ladies and gentlemen. It would cause if the state were, were so for example, if the state actually put this kind of crime into circulation, the state would know that vulnerable people or people who are looking to be accepted would be radicalized and likely influenced by this. And these are people that the state wants to eliminate, are those people who are nuisances to the state. And the state, so people that are nuisances to the state or looked at troublemakers to the state are often those who the state attempts to radicalize. So if a radicalized person, to reiterate, if a radicalized person idolizes Mangione and commits an act like this, ladies and gentlemen, the state is more likely to take a hands on approach to eliminate the threat. So let's say, for instance, right now we have Luigi Mangione, right? And he committed this act, allegedly. And so now there is a lot of media attention. Everybody is glued to their screens on this case. And the state is looking to actually eliminate another threat. And so this other threat is a radicalized person, right? And so this threat is a excuse me, so this threat that the state wants to eliminate is a person who is being radicalized. And so if this person acts on those feelings, right? Those feelings or those beliefs or that ideology, the state will take a hands-on approach and eliminate that person. And so therefore, this person is eliminated. And you may say, well, Kiana, that none of that makes sense to me. I don't believe that. Like I, I possibly you may say, well, Kiana, that possibly does not make any sense. Like there's no way that I can get on board with the state being involved in this particular case. So all of those elements don't make sense. Well, ladies and gentlemen, so that is an element to consider, but it's really not the main element, right? So a stronger argument is an organized crime group. And so let's review those elements. So a universally attractive person can be used to commit a homicide for a disgruntled group. So you have a disgruntled group of people who all have a grievance against one person. And this one person is looked at as corrupt. This one person is looked at as um, powerful in a sense. And you have this one group of people who is putting forth a very attractive person who is less likely to be criminalized or less likely to do time in jail and more likely to be acquitted. And so let's review that. So, indeed, under the conspiracy model, there must be a material and financial benefit. And so, what is the material benefit for the state? Because you may say, well, Kiana, the state has the purse power, right? The state has money. And so the state doesn't need to gain anything financially. But corruption often deals with bribes and financial gain. But if we are to not consider that argument and consider that there is a material benefit, that material benefit would be the elimination of a person who is a nuisance to the state. And if we are to reject that argument altogether and say, Kiana, no, that does not work for me, then the stronger argument is an organized crime group. And so, what is the benefit there is the elimination of a person who has who is alleged or who has been seen to aggrieve a group of people. Yet not all parties may be a party to the same agreement. So, under the United Nations Transnational Organized Crime uh, Convention, not all parties need to know about this agreement. There may be different agreements between the parties. So you can have like a group of 20 people, and within this group of 20 people, different groups have different agreements, but everybody agrees that this one person is to be eliminated. So they may know of or suspect its existence. So, for example, they may know and suspect that Brian Thompson will be eliminated, but not know exactly how that's going to be done, right? And they may not know exactly what weapons are going to be used to do that. And they may not know exactly who the state or who this disgruntled group is going to put in front to do that. They may not know that. But there are like different agreements. So you have just as an example, you have a group of 20 conspirators, right? Together. And within this group, you have different agreements, and everybody suspects that a specific crime is going to take place, but not everybody knows exactly how it's going to happen because that message is being controlled so that that crime can occur. And this brings us, ladies and gentlemen, to the participation model. And so, under the participation model, the person must have taken an active part in either the criminal activity of an organized crime group or its intention to commit the crime in question. So, how does this, how can we say that this is Mangione, right? That he is a part of this? Well, allegedly, he could have conspired to act as the fall person. Again, remember, he doesn't look anything like the original suspect. And he doesn't look anything like that person. A lot of people agree on that, but he could agree to be the fall person as this attractive person who is likely to be acquitted and is able to commit a crime for the state. Do you see how that works out? Like you have an attractive person who commits a crime for the state and they are acquitted. And so now the attractive person gets off scot free. They get book deals, they get contracts, they become a celebrity, and the state's hand is clean. That is the material benefit. And I would say in some cases that that would be a financial benefit as well. Now, there are some people probably would criticize me for this. I would probably get so I would probably receive critiques on my theories on this case coming from social media influencers. And I think that one criticism would be um, an in, uh, what would that criticism be? So I think a criticism would be the way that I'm interpreting this crime and probably how they are interpreting it as well. And so when we look at interpretivism, it would that word is difficult to pronounce, right? Interpretivism. What that does is that seeks to understand how behavior by exploring individual circumstances, perceptions, and meaning. Uh, this interpretive uh, approach, interpretivist approach, rejects the idea that complex social and harm interactions can ever be fully measured and tries to be, or excuse me, it tries to see behavior in situations through the eyes of those participating. And I think that that's where people would disagree with me here is that they would, I think that they would use an interpretivism or interpretivist approach to this case, and they would try to see exactly how, like, what's in the environment that is influencing the behaviors of the alleged suspect, right? And to try and understand those behaviors and the situation through the eyes of those participating. So that is what has happened here is that the community has tried to look at Mangione's behavior and to look at that behavior through his eyes and what he has gone through. And that I think that approach is quite compelling here because it is emotive and it forces the public to put itself in the shoes of Mangione, a person who has had a horrific procedure that didn't turn out well, that is impacting his life, many aspects of his life. And so you can see how this interpretivist approach, and I guess, to legal theory, right, would benefit Mangione, especially coming from the public. And so that's what I think that's my argument. I think that I would get critique using that approach, right? Because that is the approach that is being used in this case. But then I would argue that if I go back to my original argument, so my less convincing argument, which is the state being involved, if I go back to that argument, then I would say that the state is attempting to sway public opinion by placing Mangione in this bulletproof vest. Now, some people argue that it makes him look like a criminal because he's being placed in this bulletproof vest. But I disagree. And I think that Luigi Mangione's defense attorney would agree with me on this because during her press conference, she stopped short of actually saying that he was placed in a bulletproof vest. And why did she do that? The reason why she did that, ladies and gentlemen, in my personal opinion, is that when you think about a bulletproof vest, you think about protection. It conveys that the person who is in the vest is being protected. And oftentimes, when you think about a bulletproof vest, you think about law enforcement, right? That law enforcement is wearing a bulletproof vest. And so it conveys a sense of authority that the person has. And then having one in such in this vest, I think it also conveys that that person's life could be endangered, that someone could endanger that person's life. Therefore, this person needs to wear a bulletproof vest. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's see if these facts match up. Not many people in the public in the United States are upset with Luigi Mangione. And on the other hand, I am quite certain that Brian Thompson's family is upset. I mean, what family would not be, right? I'm pretty sure that the family is devastated. What family would not be? The majority of the public who is speaking on this particular case, they don't look at Luigi Mangione as a criminal or with ill feelings. And so if one allowed Luigi Mangione to walk through the public, do a perp walk through the public, ladies and gentlemen, I would almost bet you that he would get more hugs and kisses than anything else. And so that raises the question as to whether these arguments that are being put before us, whether they hold any weight. Now, I respect a lot of the social media influencers, the bloggers, and the podcasters who are actually bringing these arguments. I think that they're very intelligent and very knowledgeable, probably more so than me. But when I look at this critically, I can see that there are other elements to this case. And I would almost argue that by placing Mangione in a bulletproof vest goes to his benefit more than it harms him. It, it goes in his favor more than it harms him. Now, let's consider something else, ladies and gentlemen. Mangione's trial is held in New York. And you may say, well, Quianna, well, how does that benefit him? Guess what demographic, other than Italians, are concentrated in New York? I just want you to take a moment and guess. So, if you haven't guessed already, well, it's the Greeks. And so, Greeks, they were like the first to settle in New York. And I think that if you are a person from Greece and you are well versed on your history, then you would have an aversion to perp walks. For instance, in ancient Greece, captured criminals were paraded in chains through crowded thoroughfares so that the public could torment and abuse them. And ladies and gentlemen, throughout history, many Greeks disliked this. So the perp walk to people that are Greek, they have an aversion to it. And people who are concentrated in New York, a large portion of the population that are concentrated in New York are people from Greece. This raises the argument, and or rather, it raises the question, ladies and gentlemen, as to whether this all is intentional. Because if there is a large segment of the population that are Greek, there is a strong possibility that some of those people would be on the jury. And Greek people dislike these perp walks because these have been used against Greek people in their history to condemn them. It is a stronger case for Luigi Mangione to be acquitted. Now, I want to go ahead and go to that case, Lauro versus Charles, and we're going to go ahead and talk about the perp walk. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let's see. So, ladies and gentlemen, this case is Lauro versus Charles. This is the case that Mangione's defense attorney brought up, I think, during his arraignment hearing or his first hearing, bail hearing. And she cited this case and the reason why she cited this case was because of the perp walk. And I want to go ahead and read to you about this. Okay, so it says, although a perp walk commonly occurs before any judicial determination that a suspect has actually committed the crime for what he was arrested, or even that there is enough evidence to justify a trial, a suspect in handcuffs being led into a station house is a powerful image of guilt. Now, you may say, well, Quianna, if it's a powerful image of guilt, surely like some of the people in the public would, be conditioned to say that Luigi Mangione is guilty. But no, ladies and gentlemen, because the perp walk has been used in New York commonly, and the public does not like these perp walks because they think of it as the state trying to influence our perceptions and our beliefs that the suspect is guilty. And what that does is it infringes on a person's presumption of innocence. And thus, this perp walk is seen as, I think, it's frowned upon by the public. Indeed, the perp walk has been described as a ritual degradation that publicly signals change in status from an ordinary citizen. That's just one part, right? So the public would look at this as, okay, Mangione's status is changing and the state is doing this intentionally. And thus, this is a bad thing. And that makes his case stronger for acquittal. Let's read more. I want to go to this part. Where is it? Let's see if I can find it. Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to find my space. Paragraph. Okay. Here, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I want to read this to you. It has long been established that the objectives of the Fourth Amendment are to preserve the right to privacy to the maximum extent consistent with reasonable exercise of law enforcement duties, and that in normal situations where warrants are required, law enforcement officers' invasion of privacy of a home must be grounded on either the express terms of a warrant or implied authority to take reasonable law enforcement actions related to the execution of a warrant. Moreover, we concluded the contours of the right at issue were sufficiently obvious so that a reasonable officer would have understood the right along violated that right. Now, you may say, well, Kiana, what does that have to do with what does that have to do with this the case at bar, Mangione's case? Well, remember, ladies and gentlemen, that Mangione's case was not first brought in the courts of Pennsylvania. And that's where the evidence was, right? So allegedly, Mangione allegedly had this evidence on him in Pennsylvania. And his lawyer has argued that there are Fourth Amendment violations to a search and seizure. She argued that in a press conference, that there are serious search and seizure violations here. And that is an argument about privacy. So we understand that it's not only your home that the Fourth Amendment applies, the Fourth Amendment also applies upon your person. And so that's the reason why I brought this up, because you can see that there is chipping away at this case, bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. And lastly, I want to make one more reference to this case. So let's go here, ladies and gentlemen. So now we're tying this into the perp walk. So the Fourth Amendment, let's go ahead and tie it in. But in staging the perp walk, this is of course in Lauro versus Charles, uh, the opinion of the court. But in staging the perp walk, Detective Charles engaged in conduct that was unrelated to the object of the arrest, that had no legitimate law enforcement justification, and that invaded Lauro's privacy to no purpose by exacerbating Lauro's seizure in an unreasonable manner. By invading, do you see that? By exacerbating Lauro's seizure in an unreasonable manner, that police officer violated the Fourth Amendment. So we can see that this is the argument that the attorney is putting forth before the court, is that in a sense there's two sections to this, right? So there is a seizure in Pennsylvania that the attorney is arguing that um, was unlawful. And of course, she does not necessarily expound on those arguments, but one can see where she is going with it. And two, there is the argument that there is a seizure in New York through this perp walk, right? Because the argument is that the defense attorney believes that there's no reasonable justification for it, no legitimate law enforcement aim. And if there's no legitimate law enforcement justification, and that is unrelated to the arrest, by doing this perp walk, what that does is it invades that person's privacy. Because, and you may say, well, Kiana, how does it invade the person's privacy? Well, because a person is supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. And so if that is the case, then the defense attorney is arguing, okay, well, this perp walk is an invasion upon Mangione's privacy. because he's supposed to be presumed innocent. And so there's no reason to parade him around as if he is a criminal. There's more. There's more. And this gets me to the final part of this live stream. I think this is like the icing on the cake. So we've gone through organized crime. There is two theories. One is state involvement, and one is a disgruntled organized crime group. We went through those elements, right? And then we actually talked about the aversion that Greek people have to these perp walks that are taking place not only in New York, but has been frowned upon throughout ancient Greek history. And we understand that there is a large segment of Greek people in New York. And if there is a large segment of Greek people in New York, they're well versed on their history, and they see this perp walk on Twitter X, on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, on legacy media, they are likely to be offended by it. Which, what does that do? All of that goes towards an acquittal. Second, attractive people are less likely to be convicted. So Linda Smolak argues that Americans are notorious for equating beauty with good. So Americans are known to equate attractive people with good, doing something good, being good. And there is evidence to support that people expect attractive people to be nicer, smarter, and more capable than people who are perceived as unattractive. And what do we have in this case? We have an attractive person, right? We have Luigi Mangione. He is an attractive man. He is a very intelligent person. So we can see how this is checking off all the boxes to studies. The research has shown he's been looked at by many people as a very kind person. So you have a very kind person, you have a very attractive person, and you have somebody who is highly intelligent. All that supports, uh, I guess, in the eyes of the public, an acquittal. To be sure, so Nicola Ramsey, or excuse me, Nicola Rumsey and Diana Harcourt found that attractive adults are both judged and treated more positively than adults that are perceived as unattractive. W- Where do we see this? Like, hence the inpouring of funds to support Mangione's legal defense. Ladies and gentlemen, when have you seen, and I struggled with this, like before I came to this live, I asked myself, Kiana, are there any cases of an unattractive person doing something similar to Luigi Mangione and receiving an inpouring of funds because that person was thought to do something, you know, a courageous act, right? Or something that was perceived in the eyes of the public. And so I'm not going to actually answer that question. That's something that I want you to reflect on. I want you to reflect on that and ask yourself, Has there been cases like that? But we know that there has been an inpouring of funds to support Mangione's legal defense. And ladies and gentlemen, Mangione is a very wealthy person. His family has a lot of wealth. So you have a very wealthy person coming from wealth who is receiving an inpouring of funds to support their legal defense. I can't remember the person's name. I was watching an interview with Piers Morgan, and I can't remember the person's name that was doing the interview, but he was someone who could possibly be seen as a universally attractive man. And in that interview, he argued that as an attractive person, people are nice to you, people give you things for free. Let me see if I can pull that interview up, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, so we're on the same sheet of music, you know what I'm talking about. Let's see, where is it? So he did an interview. Let's see, videos. Does he have his I'm trying to see if he has his streams, Piers Morgan, if he has his playlist by interviews. Okay, uncensored. Okay, let's see. Bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to find that interview. I hadn't planned on actually bringing that up, but now that um, okay, I found the interview. It's with a person named Army Hammer. Is it what I believe his name is? Let's Let me see if I can do transcript so I can get to it faster. Uh, okay, ladies and gentlemen. Well, actually, he was talking about being famous, so maybe I won't use that. I thought that he was actually talking about being attractive, but I think he's talking about like when you're famous, people are nice to you. When you're famous, people give you things for free. When you're famous, people, bend over backwards for you. And so I guess, that's not a good piece of evidence to support my position, but We also know that when you're attractive, people do the same thing. Also, ladies and gentlemen, earlier studies, they suggest that jurors were more lenient in their judgments of guilt and in sentencing of defendants with a more attractive facial appearance. So you can kind of see, right? People who are more attractive and they're put through the criminal justice system or the criminal injustice system, however you want to perceive it or think about it, we can see disparities, right? That there is an inequality. So those defendants that are less likely to be perceived as attractive are more likely to get harsher sentences, whereas those that are perceived as attractive by the public, universally attractive, are more likely to be acquitted. Now, we also know that when we look at unattractiveness, we can see that it has been persistently used to portray people as the enemy or as the villain, right? So unattractive people have been thought of as, the enemy in the situation or the villain. And there is probably evidence to support that, right? Like you do remember that series on Netflix, Baby Reindeer, where you had Martha Fiona Harvey. Uh, And so in that series, she was portrayed as this person who was depicted as, or not only portrayed as a person who was unstable, but depicted as a villain. And I think that in this, her appearance in that series played a significant part in shaping our opinions and our beliefs about this, right? And Richard Gadd was looked at as the good guy, as the attractive guy by, I guess, standards in Europe. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is just interesting, I think, to me to reflect on this. Um, I think when we're looking, so when we're considering whether a person is attractive or unattractive, right? There are scholars that argue that the public needs to learn how to think about prejudice and interact with normal and to interact normally with people who so for instance people who have faces that are unusual. So what are scholars saying there? So when I was doing some reading, I found that oftentimes when people see persons that they perceive to be unattractive, one of the things that they do is um, look away and like quickly look away because they don't want this person to see them staring at them. So sometimes people look away because there's a feeling of I'm not going to replace words for the person, but they may look away for a particular reason, right? And then another reason could be they don't want that person to see them looking at them. And so scholars argue that sometimes when we are looking at somebody who we believe to be unattractive, that we need to get comfortable with those faces. And by looking at those faces and understanding what it is about the face that we feel is unattractive. And by doing so, by really paying attention to faces that we perceive as unattractive, what that does is that actually gets us more familiar with faces that we uh, don't normally see. Because oftentimes, if people are more so or more likely looking at faces that they perceive as attractive, less likely looking at faces as unattractive. And it is this bias that results in disparities that we see in the criminal justice system and that we see in life in general, right? And so if we take more time to um, according to scholars, if we take more time to really not in a disrespectful way, but in a way that is thoughtful and respectful to analyze faces that we perceive as unattractive. What I think what that does is gets us more comfortable with different faces and understanding that people are not always going to look the same, that people are going to have different facial structures. And I think what the scholars are presenting to us there is that we're less likely to be or to act prejudicially to people who don't have a traditionally or universally attractive face. Now, lastly, there are a few intersections in that last example about the baby reindeer series, Martha Harvey. And so, what are her intersections? Remember in a video that I uploaded, I talk about Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality. And so, Kimberly Crenshaw, she describes intersectionality as a person standing in the middle of the street. And so, this person is if they have a lot of intersections. So if they're standing in the middle of the street and in the center, if it's a four-way lane and a person is standing in the center, if a crash happens, that person is getting hit uh, by all of those vehicles coming from all those lanes. And so in the case of Martha Harvey, we have coming from one lane, we have her being perceived or her being overweight, right? That is, uh, oh, we know that there is prejudice against people who are overweight, and people are and sometimes people who are overweight are discriminated against in society, and we know that that is an intersection that hits Martha Harvey in this case. Ageism is another intersection because we understand that people that are older often are discriminated against as well. And then gender as a female, there has been a long-standing history of women being discriminated against in a patriarchal system. And so these three intersections that Martha Harvey is dealing with, right? So we have her dealing with gender, of course, her being an older woman, and then being an overweight woman who this celebrity man who is underweight has made this claim against her. And that's the way that I understand Crenshaw's intersectionality and how it applies to Martha Harvey. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think about going back to the Luigi Mangione case? Do you think that Luigi Mangione is innocent? Do you think that there is another suspect? Do you think that more than one person is involved? If so, do you think that the state is involved? If your answer to that is no, and you think that someone is involved, then who? If you don't believe that this is more than one person involved, and you believe that Luigi Mangione is guilty, or you believe that he is allegedly the suspect in the case, correction, if you believe that he is allegedly the suspect in the case, and you believe that he should be found not guilty, what are your reasons for that? Other than the healthcare system is corrupt. What are other reasons why you believe that he should be found not guilty other than the healthcare system is corrupt? Or is that your argument that the healthcare system is corrupt? And my last question is, if you support Luigi Mangione, thinking about Luigi Mangione allegedly committing a crime like that, and if we are replacing Brian Thompson with someone you know, would that change your opinion about this case. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. I am going to link my Facebook account to the description in this video. I am also going to be linking my Substack account to the description as well. I hope that this has been an informative video, and um, I hope that this video has also been something that has enlightened you or maybe got you thinking. That it was the whole purpose of this video is to, raise those discussions, or to raise arguments and to raise questions and to get a discussion or to get a debate going. It's, I think, an important thing to do in when we're talking about media discourse. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you have a good evening. Bye bye.